Okay, I can't even begin how frustrating this is right now. This is gonna be the intro. I had edited this video. I have 3 videos in the exact same format that I edited. They're ready to go. However, I just came into a problem that because I don't have clips showing my face, that they think that I pirated the whole movie. Like, I'm doing movie reviews. They think I'm pirating the whole movie, and so they've cut out, like, my 25-minute video got cut down to 5 minutes of usable content. And it's got copyrighted, not a copyright strike, but it just got copyrighted and it was not viewable to anybody. So now I have to film parts of this. So if you saw my community post saying that the video was uploaded, it wasn't. I mean, it was. I literally did, but you couldn't see it. So I gotta redo it all. So this is me redoing it all. But I gotta find a better setup, a better, like, everything. So let me go do that. Okay. To give a little bit more context on the situation, I voice-overed everything, so I just needed to find clips to fit in. And obviously it didn't like that. So I have my script here. It is unbelievably hot. It's the tail end of November. But as most of you, actually you probably don't know, our AC is broken, so there's that. But also we used to have window units, but our dog figured out how to poke through the holes, so now we can't have those anymore either. So I'm just sweating, okay? Anyway, so this is now the new format of the video. So this is interesting. I have my script, so I'm gonna put it like in this general area so that I can just look at it when need be. All right. So, Crimson Peak was a movie that was released in 2015. Okay. Crimson Peak was a movie that was released in 2015. It was directed by Guillermo del Toro, who's probably, like, the movie I can, like, think off the top of my head that he's most famous for is The Shape of Water. So, it's a sumptuous gothic romance horror that kind of goes into... how do I explain? It plunges viewers into a haunted Victorian world. Okay, hold on, that's distracting me. Okay, so the film centers on Edith Cushing, okay, who's played by, we're gonna call her Mia W. because I don't want to mispronounce her last name, and I don't know how, so. Edith Cushing is a young American writer who's haunted by the ghost of her mother. Basically, her mother dies of, like, the plague. No, anyway. And she visits her one night and is like, beware of Crimson Peak, and Edith can see ghosts. Pretty sick. So she meets Edith. She meets an English aristocrat, Thomas Sharp, who's played by Tom Hiddleston. So that was reason enough for me to watch the movie. And his enigmatic sister, Lady Lucille Sharp, who's played by Jessica Chastain. They all meet in Buffalo, New York. It's where the first, honestly, probably like quarter of the movie is set. The rest of it is at Allardale Hall in England, which we'll get there eventually. Thomas and Lucille seek investors for their blood red clay mine at Allardale Hall. It's basically like a crumbling mansion. Like, it's very decrepit, and it's all set on, like, clay mines, like red clay mines. So this kind of, like, you know, like, rusty clay seeps up through the floorboards. Like, the manor is quite literally, like, sinking into the ground. So, and it seeps, like, when it snows, it seeps into the snow, so hence Crimson Peak gets its name that way. So, motionpictures.org explains that Sir Thomas Sharp is an English nobleman who's fallen on hard times, and his sister, Lady Lucille, they are looking for bank credit and speculators to invest in developing the blood red clay mine upon which their estate Allardale Hall rests. When the clay seeps up to the surface and stains the snow, the mountainside is known as Crimson Peak. All of which I kind of already explained to you. So Edith is absolutely smitten with this dashing nobleman, and I mean, it's Tom Hiddleston, so who could really blame her? And soon, after they meet, Edith is off to England to, go to where they stay, which is Ellerdale Hall, as Sharp's new wife. So in other words, Edith falls deeply for Thomas, because who wouldn't? And her father, Carter Cushing, who's played by Jim Beaver, he, is immediately suspicious of them, and he looks into them, and, he finds out, this really scandalous secret that the viewer does not get to know about until much later, and is like, you can't marry my daughter, break her heart. And he does. But then, yeah, okay, anyway. We're going to talk about the plot. So the film's story unfolds as follows. There's a childhood ghost. So this is, right at the beginning of the movie. So as child Edith first sees her mother's ghost warning her to stay away from Crimson Peak. It's this traumatic vision. Her mother died of black cholera, which kind of just it really shapes Edith into who she is, the whole being able to see ghosts thing. So then much later she meets the Sharps in Buffalo, New York, and Thomas Sharps arrives with Lucille in tow, but we don't see her until later. We see Thomas first. They seek investment in the blood red clay mine, and he courts Edith at her family home, which Lucille gives Edie, what the frick? Okay. Lucille gives Edith a chilly response. She's just not very into her, I guess. At the beginning, she's just very, standoffish and kind of a show-off almost. She shows off her pianist skills. She plays piano, really well. And she's kind of a show-off in that way. So, Edith admires the pair of siblings, and especially Thomas, and then they soon announce their engagement. Okay, so in one of these scenes on Buffalo, it's a very pivotal early scene that happens in a park where Edith and Lucille sit side by side. So Lucille's sitting there, and she's in black lace, and she ominously tells Edith that Ellerdale Hall can only sustain moths, and they eat the beautiful butterflies. So a lot of costume analysis, and there are a lot of videos online and articles that talk about how great the costuming is in Crimson Peak, and I definitely could not do the subject justice, so just know, we're gonna get there. There's, a small section, but if you were really interested in, seeing more of that, there are great videos out there that you can find. That there's, obviously a deliberate contrast, and this is where I wish I could show you. I'll see if I can sneak the clip in there, but I think I'm gonna put it in the thumbnail, so just go refer to the thumbnail if you can't, So, Edith is wearing a light floral dress, and while Lucille's, she's in a dark outfit, and she's, got a red rose pinned to her heart, and it's, very much okay, Edith is the butterfly, and Lucille is the moth, right? So, the dialogue and the costuming of the scene kind of just foreshadow the siblings' nature, specifically with Lucille, where Lucille will be the predatory moth to Edith's butterfly, preying on her youth and beauty. So then, after the sudden tragedy of her dad mysteriously dying, Edith marries Thomas, and they relocate to the family's estate.
He explains
so now we're at
that
Hall.
he explicitly aimed the film to build the costumes and couture, the architecture, creating kind of an old-fashioned, grand feel to the film. He cited classic influences Robert Wise's The Haunting, Jack Clayton's The Innocents, and even Hitchcock's Rebecca.
Carries her in bridal
Indeed, critics have pointed out that Crimson Peak wears its heart on its sleeve, much like those other Victorian romances. As one review notes, Edith herself quips that it isn't a ghost story, but a story with a ghost in it. And the film is not a horror, but it's rather a gothic Victorian romance with some horror thrown in. So more broadly, gothic romance has its roots in the late 18th, early 19th centuries, specifically in literature. So Mary Shelley, Bronte, there's plenty of gothic writers out there, and they all have common tropes of independent women and dark brooding men and creepy castles, monsters, sometimes, obviously, we have Frankenstein's monster, and Dracula is another one from that time period. So Del Toro's movie directly channels in that tradition. For example, Peter Bradshaw notes that the film's
Edith stumbles into
territory,
this, closet thing that has a bunch
it's very
of
dark,
discs.
and
I guess they're not discs.
Mark Kermode highlights the echoes of Jane Eyre and Rebecca,
and
so
there's
more
etching in them because they're
Victorian
recorded,
Gothic romances. So Del Toro also flips modern horror trends rather than found footage or jump scares. Crimson Peak embraces the lavish romantic style of a Gothic romance while interweaving gore where needed. And obviously Del Toro goes on to explore the different types of monsters there. This was a very it was a very Gothic romance, absolutely.
So
you also see a lot of monster romance in Gothic books,
who's played
and
by Charlie
eventually
Hunnam.
he does go on to direct The Shape of Water, so it all just ties in with his general vision of films.
Trust the siblings, he does not trust the
one of
sharks
his
at all,
goals
so he came to,
was to
check
explore
up
gender
on
and
her.
Power and horror. So a lot of academic analysis can point out that
as many of
Crimson
you know,
Peak uses its ghosts as metaphors of the past and women's anxieties. Obviously, we see that later when Edith talks about her book, she always talks about the ghosts not being necessarily monsters, but metaphors of the past. So Edith, as a female writer in 1901, knows that she must become invisible as a woman to succeed in publishing. As the film's critique shows, I mean, she is constantly shot down by publishers because they know she's a woman, and they're not going to publish anything a woman has written unless it's a romance. So she's going to work on typing out her manuscript, and this is all before she meets the Sharp siblings. So the specters themselves, they do highlight trapped women, like the two murdered wives, and it suggests that female suffering was buried, and it's now being revealed. So in short, the film updates Gothic romance for the 21st century lens, marrying old tropes like a haunted manor, secret lineage, forbidden love, with a modern sensibilities about gender and destiny.
So finally in 2012,
and as I talked about before, costumes and fashion were absolutely on point with this movie. So the costumes in Crimson Peak are the most vital storytelling tool.
The film as a
designer Kate Holly builds color schemes around location. Buffalo scenes are warm and lush, so there are golden carriages and autumn hues, where Allerdale Hall is bleak and icy. So in Buffalo, Edith wears light lace and cream or even burnt oranges, reflecting the rich, warm glow of her world as she lives in New York, while Lucille's outfits are heavy, dark fabrics, and they symbolize that kind of repressed gloom of her life. And at Buffalo Hall, Lucille's shocking crimson gown, which, by the way, that dress is absolutely gorgeous, and it's the first time that we see anybody wear any sort of red or crimson
Edith narrates, she says
in the movie.
This is not a ghost
and
story,
it immediately sets her apart from Edith's more modern pastel frock. And that red dress
I think
does really foreshadow what goes on into the rest of the movie. Crimson Peak, the villain of it all.
Del Toro
so Edith's costume, they also carry that subtle macabre details. So in her cream ball gown, she wears a braided mourning belt made from her late mother's hair, hinting that although she does look innocent next to Lucille, she is no stranger to death. And that is very obvious. She is followed by it. She sees people who have died all the time. And at Allerdale Hall, the symbolism kind of goes a step further. So Lucille's wardrobe throughout the movie is basically a living decay. She wears these deep blues and greens and in velvet, and they're embroidered with leaves and acorns and moths. And it's as if, in a way, she's being consumed by the house itself. We see throughout the film that this house is absolutely covered in moths. They are everywhere. Holly does go on to explain that Lucy's costumes use antiquated pleating and stuck-on foliage to kind of reinforce that feeling of becoming a part of the house.
Dark brooding men amid creepy
so in contrast, Edith's gowns in England, they're pale, they're rose-colored, or they're white, and they're mostly ball gowns. So a lot of them have real puffy sleeves, especially her nightgowns. and they begin to incorporate darker tones as danger approaches, but they remain light and flowing and pristine. So, for example, there's this pivotal scene that I've talked about before. And this isn't at Allerdale Hall, but this is in the park before they get to Allerdale Hall and before she's aware of the Sharps' danger. Their clothing really does encapsulate the butterfly versus moth metaphor. Again, Edith's dress has fluffy white sleeves that really do resemble butterfly wings, and her floral bonnet suggests life and warmth. And Lucille, by contrast, is wearing full black lace and a straw hat. And, where Lucille is all dark and heavy and tight, Edith is bright, light, and she's flowing. It almost seems as though she grazes off the ground. Like, she's not really walking, she's floating. And
one of Del Toro's goals is to
truly
a
moth and a butterfly.
So,
Lucille even has that red rose I mentioned earlier. It's over her heart. It's like a blood stain in a way, and
so Edith,
it mixes that love
knows that she must
of the film
as a woman
and the title, the film's title color, obviously crimson, but love and passion and blood and anger and everything that Lucille's character embodies can be embodied by the color of red. There's that lust and sensuality and even in some ways romance, but just this, red is such a fierce color.
Because her handwriting is so obviously
talking about
feminine,
costumes,
so then
it is so important to talk about what exactly color analysis means, what colors represent,
they don't
what
know that she's
the
a woman.
Costume designer, in this case Holly, was going for.
Could be appreciated
and
more.
That scene, which is probably on screen right now, is just so
women.
You look at it and it's so striking.
Thomas's wives are murdered, right?
That you immediately understand and you immediately get this unsettling feeling of, okay, there's a predator with their prey.
Shoved in the closet,
so Crimson Peak ultimately stands as a modern Gothic romance. It's a visually arresting tale of love and death, and it's sad. I mean, Del Toro, he wears his influences on his sleeves, and he creates what most would call a Gothic fantasy romance that is outrageously sumptuous, gruesomely violent, and designed within an inch of its life.
We will talk about
he took everything that needed this film to be what it is. I will say that many people think that this film is very, very romantic, and while it is a romance, I think it's less about the romance part and more about the Gothic part.
The culture is different.
You have to understand
because this 75% of this movie takes place in
some of these situations
19th century
are,
England.
and you can't be blind to the other things that go on in the movie just because you want Tom Hiddleston to get with whoever else is on screen,
on that.
So, it is such a lush production design, and the costumes earn praise. I mean, Stephen King himself declared that the movie was gorgeous and terrifying. So and the visuals really are. And as I said, I'm not a movie person. I'm less so a horror movie person. I don't even read horror novels that often. I've never read a Stephen King book, though I do want to. Billy Summers, the one about time travel and JFK, those ones seem very interesting to me. But Carrie, I've seen Carrie. I really did like that one. It is my favorite movie that was based on the Stephen King book that I've seen.
And it's kind of like to represent
anyway, Stephen King is known in the horror genre, and I really also did like Crimson Peak. So I think I'm kind of finding my balance of what gore I can handle in the storytelling of it all. Again, this is a Gothic romance that throws in little elements of horror where it sees fit. So, this movie, it holds a respectable 72% on Rotten Tomatoes. And it's all thanks to the atmosphere that the movie has. Every place feels so different and so real.
Edith's costume also,
old New York is they're just very beautiful and yes, even sometimes terrifying places. So, even after all this, some reviewers find the story is uneven. They call it forgettable.
So,
and it is an elaborate style,
Hall,
and it occasionally
the symbolism
overwhelms the narrative.
It kind of enriches
Again,
itself.
I really liked Crimson Peak, and I can completely understand why some people didn't. The twist at the very end is, for some people, a complete deal breaker. But if you've seen Game of Thrones, I believe that you've seen worse. And I'm just saying that off public knowledge. I've only seen the first couple minutes of the first episode of Game of Thrones.
The house is very dark.
I don't think anybody could even bully me into watching all of that. It just seems too much. I might read the books. Who knows? Anyway, so for our purposes today, Crimson Peak is it's rich. It is a rich film with rich dialogue and costume design and set design. And there's a lot to unpack in this movie. It invites that academic analysis like a novel would. And that's the closest thing I can relate it to, because that is, in effect, what I'm really good at. So, I read, I write, novels are my forte, so I can do character analysis all day. It's ghost metaphors, they tie into gender and history. I'm also a history buff, so watch out, guys. I know my stuff. Not
wears full black lace,
necessarily English history, but I am taking a British literature class right now, so watch out.
Is bright, light, and flowing.
I might have a lot of information. Anyway, so it's tropes, the forbidden heirloom of love and the uncanny house, the incestuous family secrets. It echoes the literary Gothic canon, and ultimately, whether you watch it as a creepy atonal thriller or a heartfelt period romance, Del Toro's film is a feast for the eyes, and it's especially in its costuming and visuals. As you prepare for spooky season, and this is probably coming out a week after Halloween, so spooky season in some people's minds is well over, and it's time for Christmas. I, however, think that Thanksgiving needs its time,
since it has an elaborate style,
some of us have a little Halloween hangover, so,
For our purposes today,
as you prepare for fall to watch this movie,
it invites
Crimson Peak really does drive home the Gothic story structure, and it delivers that world of death and the macabre fashion that cements it as a modern classic of the genre. It's very good. And I didn't talk a lot about Thomas and Edith's love story. It is a complicated one that I don't feel
has already passed.
I can't even really talk about.
You can dive into
I'm not qualified for that. The longest relationship I had ever been in has not even been a full year.
Christmas? No? Okay.
And there's a lot of nuance that I don't feel I am prepared to talk about when it comes to Thomas, Lucille, and Edith. I will say, though, that I feel bad for Thomas.
That's where we're going to leave off for today.
I think everybody who watches the film probably feels bad for him.
And
if you haven't seen Crimson Peak and you've watched this and it's completely spoiled everything for you, I'm sorry. But
in the video as well, but a lot of these,
it is a beautiful
the rest
film.
Of these,
and really one that I will probably rewatch again. Films, the first movie I watched, and trying to see if I can get myself to watch movies I actually like, was a success. So the next time, I think we're doing Phantom of the Opera
next time.
Now,
next time is,
most of this series will be movies that I've never seen before.
Today.
I have seen Phantom of the Opera, but I saw Phantom of the Opera when I was really young, and then I saw the first 30 minutes of Phantom of the Opera 2 years ago in a theater class, and I didn't really remember it until watching it again, and I have some very strong opinions on that film. So if you want to see that, it'll be coming out very, very soon. I cannot wait for the next time. I am really excited if you guys decide to join me. And I'm going to stop rambling now. So I will see you all at some point in the near future. Goodbye.